I never thought it would come to this. Most days I felt like a typical husband, living out the mundane rhythms of life with my wife, Sarah. We had our routines, breakfast together, her book club meetings every Wednesday night, and the occasional dinner with friends. It was a comfortable existence, but lately something had shifted. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but I could feel the tension in the air, like static before a storm. At first, I chalked it up to the stress of her job. Sarah had recently been promoted, and with that came the usual pressures. She was more focused, often lost in thought, and sometimes she would stare out the window with a distant look in her eyes. But then there were the little things, the late nights at book club that seemed to stretch on longer than usual, the way she would lock her phone as soon as I entered the room, and the occasional slip of a name that didn't belong to me. I brushed it off, telling myself I was being paranoid, but the nagging feeling wouldn't go away. One evening, I found myself sitting on the couch, flipping through channels, when I noticed Sarah in the kitchen, her back to me as she prepared dinner. She was humming softly, and for a moment I thought about how much I loved her. But then the feeling of unease crept back in. Was it just my imagination, or was she being particularly secretive lately? I felt like a detective in my own home, piecing together clues that didn't quite add up. I decided to confront her about it. But how do you bring up suspicion without sounding accusatory? I practiced in my head, trying to find the right words. "Hey, Sarah, is everything okay? You seem a little distant lately." It sounded harmless enough, but I feared the reaction I might get. Would she brush it off, or would she see the doubt in my eyes? Days turned into weeks, and I kept my observations to myself. Each time she left for her book club, I felt a knot tightening in my stomach. I wanted to trust her, but the whispers of doubt echoed louder with each passing day. I started to imagine scenarios in my head, her laughing with someone else, sharing secrets that were meant for me alone. I felt like a fool for thinking this way, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. One day, while cleaning up after dinner, I noticed her phone buzzing on the counter. It was a message notification, and I instinctively glanced at the screen. It was from a contact named Mark. I didn't recognize the name, but it was the content of the message that made my heart race. "Can't wait to see you tonight, just us." I felt an electric shock course through me. My mind raced as I tried to process what I had just seen. I thought about Sarah's late nights and the way she often mentioned Mark in passing, always in the context of book discussions. But now it felt like a knife twisting in my gut. I told myself it could be innocent. Maybe they were just discussing a plot twist in the latest novel. But deep down, I knew this was more than that. My heart pounded as I tried to calm myself. I needed to know more. I couldn't confront her without evidence. I quietly grabbed her phone, my hands trembling as I scanned through her messages. The more I read, the more the ground beneath me felt like it was crumbling. There were flirty exchanges, inside jokes, and plans that clearly extended beyond the confines of a book club. Each message felt like a betrayal, a crack in the foundation of our marriage. I felt anger boiling inside me, but it was quickly overshadowed by disbelief and sadness. How could she do this to me? I thought we had a good life together, built on trust and love. But now I was left grappling with the realization that I was living a lie. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I knew I had to confront her, but how? I didn't want to just accuse her without proof, but I also felt the need to expose the truth. I needed to show her the consequences of her actions, not just for me, but for the life we had built together. As I sat there, the weight of the world pressing down on my shoulders, I realized that this was just the beginning. I was no longer the oblivious husband. I was a man on the brink of exposing a betrayal that would change everything. The moment I discovered those messages, everything changed. I felt like I was trapped in a surreal nightmare where the woman I loved was suddenly a stranger. My heart raced as I read through the texts again, each one a dagger piercing deeper into my heart. "Can't wait to see you tonight, just us." The words echoed in my mind, taunting me, and I could hardly breathe. I put her phone down, my palms sweaty and my head spinning. I felt a whirlwind of emotions, anger, betrayal, sorrow. But most of all, I felt utterly powerless. How had I allowed myself to be blind to this? I thought I knew Sarah inside and out. We had shared so much of our lives together. How could she hide something so significant? I tried to piece together the timeline in my head. The late nights, the secretive glances, the sudden change in her demeanor, it all made sense now. It was as if I had been living in a fog and now the veil had been lifted. I could see clearly, and it was terrifying. I was angry at her for betraying me, but I was also furious with myself for not noticing sooner. How could I have been so naive? I needed to confront her, but I also knew that I had to do it strategically. I couldn't just burst in and accuse her without solid proof. I needed to gather more information to understand the extent of her betrayal. I felt like a detective, searching for evidence to build my case. I decided to keep her phone closed to monitor her conversations without her knowledge. As the days passed, I became increasingly obsessed with the messages. Each time Sarah left for her book club, I felt a mix of dread and anticipation. I would sit in the living room staring at her phone, waiting for it to light up with another message from Mark. Each ding felt like a countdown to the inevitable confrontation. I started to notice the little things more. The way Sarah would come home with a smile plastered on her face, the way she would talk about her book club discussions, with a spark in her eyes that I hadn't seen in a long time. It made me sick. I felt like an outsider in my own life, watching her share moments with someone else while I was left in the dark. One night, as she prepared for another book club meeting, I decided to take a gamble. I sent a text from her phone to Mark pretending to be her. My heart raced as I typed, "Can't wait for tonight. Are you ready for some fun?" I felt a mix of thrill and dread. Would he respond? What if Sarah found out? Minutes felt like hours as I waited for a reply. Finally, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was Mark's response. "You know I always am, just be discreet." My heart sank. The implication of his words was clear. This was more than just a book discussion. This was an affair. I felt the anger boil over, and for a moment I wanted to shout, to scream, to confront her right then and there. But I held back. I needed to be calculated. I needed to expose her in a way that would hit her where it hurt the most. That's when the idea struck me. Her book club meetings were the perfect setting. She always spoke so highly of her friends, and I knew that she valued their opinions. If I could confront her in front of them, it would not only expose her betrayal but also strip away the facade she had built. I could see it now, the look of shock on her face, the disbelief of her friends. It would be a moment she would never forget. As I formulated my plan, I felt a strange sense of empowerment. I was no longer the passive husband who had been wronged. I was taking control of the situation. I would gather the evidence, and when the time was right, I would unleash it upon her. The thought sent chills down my spine, but I also felt a sense of relief. I was no longer a victim. I was a man ready to fight back. The next few days were a blur of anxiety and anticipation. I continued to monitor her texts, each one a reminder of the deception that had infiltrated my life. I felt like I was walking a tightrope, balancing between the desire for revenge and the remnants of love I still felt for Sarah. But I knew that love couldn't outweigh betrayal. And as the day of the book club meeting approached, I felt a mixture of dread and excitement. I was ready to expose the truth, to rewrite the ending of our story. I just needed to gather my courage and wait for the right moment. The days leading up to the book club meeting felt like an eternity. I was consumed by thoughts of how I would confront Sarah. I had never envisioned myself as the type of person to expose someone in a public setting, especially not my wife. But the betrayal weighed heavy on my heart, and I couldn't let it go unpunished. As I sat at my desk, staring at the screen, I began to outline my plan. I wanted to make an impact, to ensure that Sarah understood the gravity of her actions. It was clear that this wasn't just about me. It was about the life we had built together. I wanted her to feel the same confusion and heartache that I had felt upon discovering her infidelity. I thought about the dynamics of her book club. There were a few members who admired Sarah, who looked up to her as a leader. I could picture their shocked faces as I revealed the truth. But would they support her, or would they turn against her? That uncertainty only fueled my determination. I decided I would wait until the discussion had warmed up. They would typically start with light banter about the book, sharing their favorite moments and characters. I would let them get comfortable, let the laughter fill the room. Then, just as the atmosphere was at its peak, I would strike. I would read the messages aloud, each one a testament to her betrayal. The stark contrast between their joviality and the harsh reality I was about to unveil would be devastating. With every detail of the plan, I felt a sense of purpose. I wanted to gather all the evidence I could. I continued to monitor Sarah's messages, taking screenshots and noting down timestamps. I wanted to ensure that when I confronted her, there would be no room for denial. I needed her friends to see the truth, to understand that she had broken the vows we had made to each other. As I prepared my notes, I couldn't help but feel the weight of my own moral dilemma. Was I doing the right thing? Was revenge the answer? Part of me wanted to scream at her, to confront her in private and demand answers. Yet I knew that wouldn't be enough. I needed her to understand the consequences of her actions, not just for me, but for her own sense of integrity. I thought back to the life we had shared. The laughter, the quiet evenings, the love we had built over the years. I never wanted to be the villain in our story, yet here I was, planning an act of vengeance. I felt a pang of guilt, but it was quickly overshadowed by the anger that had been building inside me. I had been wronged, and it was time for justice. The day of the book club meeting arrived, and I felt a mix of anxiety and anticipation. I dressed carefully, wanting to appear calm and composed. I wanted them to take me seriously, to understand that I was not just some jealous husband seeking attention. I was a man whose heart had been shattered, and I was ready to reveal the truth. As I approached the house where the meeting would take place, I felt my heart racing. I could hear the laughter and chatter from outside, and it only intensified my nervousness. Would I be able to go through with it? Would I falter when I saw Sarah's face? I took a deep breath and stepped inside. The room was filled with familiar faces, all engrossed in conversation. Sarah was standing in the corner, chatting animatedly with her friends. She looked beautiful, her laughter ringing out like a melody. For a moment, I felt the old pang of love, but it was quickly replaced by the bitterness of betrayal. I found a spot near the back, trying to blend in as I waited for the right moment. The atmosphere was warm and inviting, a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. I could feel the tension building as I watched Sarah interact with her friends. They admired her, looked up to her, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of resentment. As the meeting began, I listened to them discuss the book. Their insights were thoughtful, and I could see why Sarah enjoyed this group so much. But the more they praised her, the more I felt the weight of my decision pressing down on me. I was about to shatter this illusion, to expose the truth that lay beneath the surface. Finally, the conversation shifted, and I knew the moment had come. I stood up, my heart pounding in my chest. All eyes turned to me, and I felt the weight of their gaze. I cleared my throat, trying to steady my voice. "Can I have everyone's attention for a moment?" I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. Sarah looked at me, confusion flickering across her face. The laughter faded, replaced by an uneasy silence. I took a deep breath, ready to reveal the truth that had been haunting me. This was it, the moment I had been waiting for. I was going to expose Sarah for what she truly was, a woman who had betrayed my trust and shattered our life together. The room fell silent as all eyes turned toward me. I could feel the weight of their gazes, a mixture of curiosity and concern. Sarah's expression shifted from confusion to alarm, and I could see her processing the situation, her mind racing to determine what I was about to say. The atmosphere was charged. It felt as if the air itself was holding its breath in anticipation. "Thank you for allowing me to interrupt," I began, my voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. "I know this is a book club meeting, but I have something important to share, something that's been weighing heavily on my mind." A few members exchanged glances, whispering to one another as I stood there trying to gauge their reactions. I could see the apprehension in Sarah's eyes, and it only fueled my determination. I had to go through with this. I owed it to myself and to our marriage. "Sarah and I have been married for several years," I continued, trying to keep my voice calm. "And I've recently discovered something that has shattered my trust in her." I could feel my heart racing as I prepared to unveil the truth. I found some text messages on her phone, messages between her and Mark, one of the members of this book club. Gasps filled the room, and I could see Sarah's face pale as she processed my words. The shocked expressions of her friends mirrored my own disbelief. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what I was about to do. I know this is a sensitive topic, but I believe it's important for you all to hear. The truth, I said, pulling out my phone. I had prepared carefully, taking screenshots of the incriminating messages. I opened the app, my hands shaking slightly as I scrolled through the conversations. I think it's time for everyone to see exactly what has been happening behind closed doors. As I began to read the messages aloud, I could feel the tension in the room thickening. Here's one. Can't wait to see you tonight, just us. I paused, letting the words sink in. The gasps grew louder and I could see Sarah's face flush with a mix of anger and embarrassment. I continued, reading more messages that painted a picture of their betrayal. And here's another. You know I always am. Just be discreet. Each line felt like a punch to the gut, not just for me but for everyone in the room. I could see the disbelief on their faces, and I knew I was making an impact. The atmosphere shifted from shock to confusion, and I could almost hear the wheels turning in their heads as they tried to process what I was revealing. I glanced at Sarah, and the look on her face was one of disbelief mixed with anger. She opened her mouth to speak, but I raised my hand to silence her. Let me finish, I said, my voice steady. This isn't just about me, it's about the trust that has been broken. I loved her, and I thought we had a life built on honesty. But this is a betrayal of everything we stood for. I could see the members of the book club shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Some looked at Sarah with pity, while others seemed to be grappling with their own feelings of disbelief. I could hear whispers, the murmur of shock rippling through the group. Sarah finally found her voice, her tone defensive. This isn't what it looks like, you're twisting everything. But I wasn't going to let her deflect. What it looks like is clear, I replied, my voice firm. You've betrayed not just me, but the trust of everyone in this room. You've lied to your friends, and now they deserve to know the truth. As I continued reading the messages, I could see Sarah's composure beginning to crack. The confident woman who had walked into the meeting was now visibly shaken, her facade crumbling with each revelation. I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. This wasn't the woman I had fallen in love with. This was a stranger who had lost her way. I finished reading the last message, and the silence that followed felt deafening. I looked around the room, taking in the shocked expressions of her friends. Some looked angry, others sympathetic, but all were stunned by the revelation. I felt a swell of emotion as the reality of what I had done sank in. I had exposed the truth, but at what cost? The room was thick with tension, and I could sense the fallout beginning to unfold. I had expected anger, but what I saw was a mix of disappointment and betrayal reflected back at me. I could feel the weight of their judgment as they turned their gaze towards Sarah, who was now visibly shaken. Sarah, one of her friends, finally spoke up, her voice trembling. How could you do this? The question hung in the air, and I could see Sarah's eyes darting between her friends and me. The realization of what she had done was beginning to wash over her, and I felt a strange sense of vindication. She had built a life of deceit, and now it was unraveling before her very eyes. As the meeting turned chaotic, with members expressing their shock and disbelief, I took a step back. I had done what I set out to do, but I felt a mixture of triumph and sorrow. I had exposed the truth, but it came at the cost of everything we had built together. I watched as Sarah struggled to defend herself, her words falling flat against the weight of the evidence I had presented. I could see the cracks in her facade, and I knew that my life would never be the same again. This was the moment I had waited for, but now that it was here, I was left grappling with the reality of what lay ahead. What would happen next? How would this affect our lives, our marriage, and the relationships we had built with these friends? As the tension in the room escalated, I realized that I had set in motion a chain of events that would change everything. The chaos in the room was palpable. Voices rose and fell. Filled with disbelief and anger, I stood in the center, feeling like a shipwrecked sailor amidst a storm, the waves crashing around me. I had expected a reaction, but the reality of it was overwhelming. I had laid bare the truth, and now it was spiraling out of control. Sarah, how could you? One of her friends exclaimed, her voice breaking. We trusted you. The accusation hung in the air like a heavy fog. I could see Sarah's face flush with shame and anger. She was cornered, and for the first time I felt a sense of empowerment wash over me. The woman who had once held my heart in her hands was now standing before me, exposed and vulnerable. But the anger I felt was not just directed at her. It was also directed at the man who had stolen her affections and the life we had built together. "Please, everyone, just listen," Sarah finally shouted, her voice rising above the din. "This isn't what it seems. Mark and I were just what?" I interrupted, my voice laced with bitterness. "Just friends. I think the messages speak for themselves. You've been lying to me. And you've been lying to all of them too. How could you think this would stay hidden forever?" The room fell silent again, but the tension was thick. I could see the doubt flickering in the eyes of her friends as they processed the gravity of what I had revealed. I had pulled back the curtain on her carefully crafted life, and now she was left scrambling to regain control. "Mark and I were discussing the book. It was all innocent," she insisted, her voice shaky but defiant. But the conviction in her words felt weak against the evidence I had presented. I could see the doubt creeping into the minds of those who had once admired her. "Is that what you call it?" I shot back. "Innocent? You know it's more than that. You made plans to meet him outside of this group. You talked about wanting to keep it discreet. This isn't just a misunderstanding, it's a betrayal." The murmurs in the room grew louder, and I could feel the shift in the atmosphere. Her friends were no longer defending her. Instead, they were questioning her motives. I watched as Sarah's facade cracked further, her bravado crumbling under the weight of the truth. "Why did you do it, Sarah?" one of her friends asked quietly. "Was it something we did? Did we not support you enough?" The question hung in the air, and I felt the sting of it. It was a question I had asked myself many times since discovering her betrayal. What had driven her to seek comfort in someone else? I had always believed we were partners, that we would face challenges together. But now I felt like I was standing on the outside, looking in on a life that no longer felt like mine. "I don't know," Sarah finally cried, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't mean for it to happen this way. I felt lost. I thought I could find a connection somewhere else, but I never wanted to hurt you." Her confession felt like a slap in the face. She had made choices, conscious decisions to step outside our marriage, and now she was trying to shift the blame onto some vague sense of lost connection. "You didn't think about me when you were texting him, did you?" I replied, my voice low and steady. "You didn't consider what it would do to us. You chose this." The room was silent again, and I could see the realization dawning on her friends. They were witnessing the unraveling of her carefully built life. The whispers of disbelief had turned into murmurs of sympathy, and I felt a surge of vindication. I had exposed the truth, and now it was time for Sarah to face the consequences. "Sarah, we need to talk," I said, my voice firm. I had no intention of letting this go. I needed to confront her outside of this chaos, away from the prying eyes of her friends. I turned to the group, my gaze sweeping over them. "Thank you for hearing me out. But this isn't just about the affair, this is about the trust that has been shattered. I need to have a conversation with my wife." As I stepped outside, I could hear the murmurs continuing behind me. I felt a mix of emotions: anger, sadness, relief. But most of all, I felt a sense of clarity. I had taken control of my narrative, and now it was time to confront Sarah directly. We stepped into the cool evening air, the weight of the confrontation hanging heavily between us. I could see her trembling, her eyes red from crying. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I could manage it. I thought I could have both." "Both?" I echoed, incredulous. "You thought you could keep me and him. You were living a lie, Sarah. You've shattered everything we've built together." "I know," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry. I didn't want to hurt you. I thought it was just a fling, something to fill the void. But I realize now that I was wrong. I never meant to betray you." Her words felt hollow, empty of the love and trust that had once defined our relationship. I wanted to believe her, to see the remorse in her eyes, but the pain was still fresh. "You say you didn't want to hurt me, but you did. You chose to betray my trust. You chose him over us." I was confused, she pleaded, tears streaming down her face. I didn't know how to talk to you about it. I thought I could fix things without hurting you. "Fix things?" I scoffed. You were the one who broke them. You could have come to me. We could have worked through our issues, but instead you chose to deceive me. You chose to share your life with someone else." The weight of her betrayal hung heavy in the air, and I felt a mix of anger and sorrow. This wasn't just about the affair, it was about the loss of trust, the loss of what we once had. I had thought we were partners, but now I felt like I was standing on the edge of a precipice, unsure of what lay ahead. "I don't know what to do now," she said, her voice trembling. "I love you, but I understand if you can't forgive me." Love. The word felt foreign on her lips after everything I had uncovered. Could I ever trust her again? Could I ever look at her and not see the betrayal? "I need time," I finally said, my voice steadied by the weight of my decision. "I need to figure out what this means for us. I can't just pretend this didn't happen." As I turned to leave, I felt a mix of sadness and resolve. I had exposed the truth, but the path ahead was uncertain. I didn't know if our marriage could survive this, but I knew one thing. I wouldn't allow myself to be a victim any longer. I had taken the first step toward reclaiming my life, but now I had to face the aftermath of the confrontation. The days that followed the confrontation blurred together, each one a mix of confusion, anger, and a deep sense of loss. I had exposed Sarah's betrayal, but the fallout left me feeling hollow. The book club meeting had shattered the image of our life together, and I was left to pick up the pieces of a marriage that felt irreparably fractured. In the days after that fateful evening, I found myself grappling with a whirlwind of emotions. I had expected to feel vindicated, but instead, I felt adrift. The proud moments of our relationship had been replaced by the stark reality of betrayal. I spent hours replaying the confrontation in my mind, wishing I could have handled it differently, but deep down, I knew there was no other way. Sarah moved out of the bedroom, taking refuge in the guest room. It was a physical separation that mirrored the emotional distance that had grown between us. I could hear her moving around the house, the sounds of her presence a constant reminder of what we had lost. I wanted to reach out to comfort her, but the anger I felt was still too raw. I had never imagined that I would be in this position, questioning everything about our life together. The memories we had built felt tainted, and I found myself staring at old photographs, trying to reconcile the smiling faces with the reality of our current situation. Friends and family began to reach out, concerned about my well-being. I told them I was fine, but the truth was that I felt like I was living in a fog. On one particularly difficult evening, I decided to take a walk to clear my head. The streets were quiet, and the cool air felt refreshing against my skin. I found myself wandering through the park where we had shared so many moments together, picnics, laughter, quiet conversations under the stars. Each step felt heavy, as if I were dragging the weight of our broken marriage with me. As I walked, I considered the possibility of forgiveness. Could I ever forgive Sarah for what she had done? The thought of letting go of my anger felt daunting. I had built walls around my heart to protect myself from further pain, but I also knew that holding onto that anger could consume me. When I returned home, I found Sarah sitting in the living room, her eyes red from crying. She looked up as I entered, and for a moment we simply stared at each other, the silence stretching between us like a chasm. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I never wanted to hurt you. I didn't think it would go this far." The remorse in her eyes was palpable, but it felt insufficient. "You made a choice, Sarah," I replied, my voice steady. "You chose to betray our trust. It's not something that can just be brushed aside with apologies." "I know," she said, tears streaming down her face. "But I want to make it right. I'll do anything to fix this. Please just give me a chance." Her desperation tugged at my heart, but I couldn't ignore the pain that lingered. "I need time," I said firmly. "Time to think about what I want and what this means for us. Right now, everything feels too raw." "I understand," she said, her voice breaking. "I'll respect that. Just know that I love you and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to prove it." I nodded, feeling the weight of her words. Love was a powerful thing, but it was also fragile, easily broken by betrayal. I knew that rebuilding our relationship would be a long and difficult journey, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to take that step. Over the next few weeks, we moved through a strange routine, living under the same roof but feeling like strangers. I found solace in the company of friends who offered support and understanding. They listened as I poured out my heart, sharing my feelings of anger, betrayal, and confusion. With their encouragement, I began to explore the possibility of counseling, both for myself and for Sarah and me as a couple. Eventually, I agreed to meet with Sarah to discuss our future. We sat across from each other in the living room, the air thick with tension. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," I began, my voice steady. "I don't know if I can forgive you, but I'm willing to try if you are." Her eyes lit up with hope, but I could see the uncertainty lurking beneath the surface. "I want to do the work to show you that I can be the partner you deserve. I know I have to earn your trust back." "It won't be easy," I warned her. "Trust is built over time and it's fragile. You need to understand the gravity of what you've done. I need to see that you're committed to making changes, not just for me, but for yourself." "I will," she promised, her voice filled with determination. "I'm ready to do whatever it takes." We began attending counseling together, navigating the complexities of our emotions and the aftermath of her betrayal. It was a painful process, filled with tears and difficult conversations, but we slowly began to peel back the layers of hurt and resentment. As time went on, I started to see glimpses of the woman I had fallen in love with, the woman who had shared my dreams and laughter. But those glimpses were often overshadowed by the memories of betrayal, and I knew that healing would take time. There were moments of progress, moments when we laughed together, when the warmth of our connection felt real again. But there were also setbacks, days filled with doubt and anger, days when I questioned whether we could truly rebuild what had been lost. I realized that the road to healing was not linear. It was filled with ups and downs, twists and turns. But through it all, we remained committed to the process. I was learning to let go of my anger to forgive, while she was learning to own her mistakes and take responsibility for her actions. As the months passed, I began to envision a future where we could move forward together. It wouldn't be easy, but I felt a flicker of hope that perhaps we could emerge from this stronger than before. I had taken the first steps toward reclaiming my life, and now I was ready to embrace the possibility of a new beginning. In the end, I learned that love is not just a feeling, it's a choice. It's a choice to rebuild, to forgive, and to trust again. And as I looked at Sarah, I realized that despite the pain, despite the betrayal, I was willing to take that leap of faith once more. With each passing day, we were rewriting the ending of our story, one of resilience, growth, and the possibility of a love renewed. And as I took her hand, I felt the weight of the past begin to lift, replaced by the hope of a brighter future together.